Hello, everyone. Welcome to our talk. This is the place where we agree, even if we do disagree. My name is René Vögtli, and my guest today is Elaine Hamilton-Grundy. Our topic today is authenticity. Hello, Elaine.
Hi, René. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you here. And I want to first say to our viewers a few things about you, how we know each other, before we start our conversation. And we will be talking about authenticity as our topic. And I intend to have like two focal points. As I mentioned to you, and actually you, while I'll talk, can start to think about which one you would like to have first. So, dear viewers, I met Elaine, I believe it was in 1993 in Hong Kong. She was in training to become a Reiki teacher. My wife and I had just finished our training. We had just started to teach in 1992. And a few years later, we lost somewhat sight of each other. Next thing I know, Elaine is in Singapore. She's opening her Reiki center there, very successfully so. Has been a book author in the meantime. In fact, in 2010, she made an international survey about Reiki's doings, how Reiki works, and published that. I had the honor to participate with some of our students. And then more recently, Elaine came back to the UK, to Europe, and we got to talk again about the situation in Europe, and our conversation became a little bit more regular, let's say. And particularly in the last year, we have been speaking very often. And in one of the conversations with Elaine, she actually said something about authenticity, and it touched me very profoundly, and it was the catalyst for today's talk. But before we get there, Elaine, expand a little bit. Have I forgotten anything? You're also a mother.
I don't think you've forgotten anything. I mean, I guess like you, I've been very blessed in that I've been able to make Reiki my profession. I think we're very lucky in that. And so I've done a lot of Reiki training over the years. I think I was in a bit of a bubble in Singapore. I know you and I've discussed this because I think the Singapore development of Reiki has been different than, say, Europe. We've got less of the history. So, and perhaps less of the different lineages and things like this. So, yeah, but I think we've pretty much covered it. Yeah.
Yes, and in fact, this may also be a topic we get around because, like you, we've been in Asia. My wife and I came to Hong Kong, and we were a little bit taken aback here in Europe, rather the other way around, meaning that it was very centralistic. It had a view only on the United States and the developments of Reiki in Europe, and I sometimes felt almost a little bit alien because I kept saying, but do you know what's going on in Australasia? Do you know what's going on in India? And so this may actually, maybe later in our conversation, be a topic we get to. Let me first, I've taken a piece of paper because I printed out the definition of authenticity. I want to first include that a little bit. The Cambridge Dictionary says the quality of being real or true. Quite simple, quite straightforward. Merriam-Webster gives a number of definitions: worthy of acceptance or belief as conforming to or based on fact. conforming to an original, not false or imitation, real, actual. And the third one is probably the one which is going to accompany us and is probably the spirit, if you agree, for our conversation today. I read it out to you. True to one's own personality, spirit, or character, is sincere and authentic with no pretensions. So that would be the definitions to go by. How does that sound to you?
You know what? I actually quite like the one that it is based on fact. Because, as you know, I'm nothing gets me more cross than belief systems. So based on fact kind of really cuts through. And that's also why, you know, I love the surveys. Because it's fact, it's people's true experience.
Wait a minute, I don't agree with you. I'm happy to go there. But first, what do you mean with belief systems? What's wrong in believing in Jesus Christ? I mean, what do you mean with belief systems?
You know what? I have no issue with belief systems as such, but my issue is more when my belief system is superior to your belief system. I have a big issue with that. And to me, Reiki as universal life force is the soup or the kind of the substrate that all the belief systems can be a part of, but there is not one ultimate belief system. And so you get something like Reiki, and obviously there are hundreds of different belief systems around Reiki, the practice of Reiki, where it comes from, how it works, blah, 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 blah. All of these, I think, add to the richness of our practice. And so to me, when you're authentic, it really means based on your fact, based on your evidence, what works for you, how it resonates with you, that is authentic. Your authentic practice, right, is the way that you feel like Reiki pulls itself out of you. Am I getting too esoteric?
No, I'm quite with you. Of course, I knew precisely what you meant with belief systems, and we giggled and laughed because even in the early 90s, we had discussions about that, of course. But I wanted for the viewer also to be a little bit more clear about it, hence my challenge. We're talking about authenticity, and one of the focal points, and we are already in the middle of this, one of the focal points actually is, what does that mean being an authentic human being, and particularly in Reiki, and even more so as a Reiki teacher? And of course, you already touched on it. And actually, I forgot to ask, and you can say no, Elaine. I made a printout of your email of the 27th of May, and I would like to quote a few choice sentences from what you said to me. Is it fine if I do it without having cleared it?
Sure.
Great. As I mentioned in my intro, I was profoundly touched by these lines, and that catalyzed in me the wish to have a talk with you on authenticity. And this is, for the viewers, what Elaine said on the 27th of May. She says a few things, and I start to quote in mid-sentence. It was like a big burst of energy yesterday, purging out the last of my needs to belong to a group. It was a real wake-up call to walk my talk. I'm really refining who I spend time with and where I put my energy. There is really so much goodness out there in the world, and so many people doing really wonderful, forward-thinking things. I realize that it is not my job to convince people to change their viewpoint. It is my job to serve my community and invite people to join me, not the other way around. Sometimes I have been wasting time on trying to pull people into my worldview rather than announce my worldview, and keep moving forwards. People who like what they hear voluntarily follow me. Those who don't, won't. And that's really perfectly fine. We all have our own path to thread. I hope that's okay that I read this out aloud, and I'd be happy if you expand a little bit on those lines.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how you think you're doing that. Like, we use that term, walking the talk and coming into our personal power. And I think when I quit the corporate world and went into Reiki full time, in a sense, I was breaking away from a community, and it was painful at the time. But then I continued to do it. And I think that the reference really with that email was more around just realizing that even the things I really hold dear, like I never really held the corporate world that dearly in my heart. I was kind of waiting for to find something that really meant something to me. And Reiki really means something to me. And so to have to break from a community of Reiki peers was actually, for me, very painful. And yet at the same time, it was really coming into this really fully authentic expression of, well, actually, I really do believe in my path, and I really do believe in what Reiki is calling out of me. So I guess in a sense that authenticity is also being confused with belonging. You know, it's like, what happens when your authentic path actually doesn't belong where you are? It puts you in a bit of a dilemma, actually.
Yes, I know what you're talking about. And it is somewhat of a contradiction, because all of us have a natural longing to belong to a family, to belong to a group, to belong, whatever. And who better to understand what it means to be a Reiki teacher than another Reiki teacher who's going through the same process. Yeah. So it is quite natural that we gravitate to each other to exchange views. And yet, and particularly as a Reiki teacher, I believe I have, as a Reiki teacher, I go a path on my own. You know, I'm married to a woman who is a Reiki teacher, and we are in such a symbiosis, and yet I am utterly convinced, and I was convinced in 1992, and in fact, I don't think neither of us could have entered this path and collaborating with each other if we hadn't mutually accepted of each other that she's going her path as a Reiki teacher and I'm going mine. And of course, in our collaboration, there were so many incidents where we did not agree on certain things, even sometimes on the interpretation of what's often called the tradition. And then to learn to get along and to agree with our disagreement. And you, Elaine, of course, to me, have been sometimes more intensely, sometimes more distantly. You have been a person in my life who I felt exactly that. And I've admired you for walking your own talk. The way you created the Reiki Center in Singapore. I invited you, or I not invited, it was not my authority to invite, but I suggested that you attend certain nationally inclusive meetings, and you showed up. And I remember one particular meeting where there was a presentation in the room by a very convincing and authoritative and important Reiki person in the Reiki community, and you and I sat there, and we had some very deep concerns about some of the content of that presentation. Now, I don't want to go into those details, they're irrelevant, but what I'm trying to say is, after that, there was silence in the room, and this silence was sitting there for quite a long time. And I looked across the room, and you sat there, and you opened your mouth, and you spoke your thing. And I greatly, greatly admired you for that. So to me, you embody a woman of authenticity, of walking her talk very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. It does get me into a lot of trouble. Yes. What else to do? I think it helps when you've got quite a lot of years of experience under you as well, though, right? Like you just feel more comfortable in the medium, and you feel more connected to your own truth around it. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm simply speaking my truth as the presenter was speaking their truth. I mean, there's actually no right or wrong in this, you know?
Yeah, I quite agree with you. And in fact, in your notes there, in your sentences, which I read out, there is another wisdom which has to do with this walking your own talk. And a Reiki teacher on his path, in many ways, it's a very lonely experience. I recently spoke to a person who was concerned about the Reiki community sometimes being a little bit aloof, almost being in a bubble, in an echo chamber, I think she may have even said. And her question really, and her idea was, why can't we reach out more? Why can't we cross the boundaries of separation more? And she had a viewpoint, particularly in today's time, in the pandemic time, for people who have difficult time, addicts, prisoners, homeless people. How do we get them into the Reiki community? And we discussed this at some point. And one of my key arguments is that as a Reiki teacher, we have an additional factor. And that is, I am actually not choosing my student. The person who wants to be initiated by me will choose me. I can offer my services, and this is, as a Reiki teacher, to some extent, my ethical duty, that I show my true colors, who I am. And part of that also means that I allow people to have a deep look in who I am, that I open up, that I show my authentic being. And interestingly, the conversation ended in a different direction, because I suggested sometimes the Reiki community is trying to open the doors for the less privileged ones and forgets that the more privileged ones equally have a right to join our classes. So we are conscious about our pricing, that the poor people can come, and how we deal our pricing. But the fact is that the royal family in the UK will not come to a public talk, and how do we provide for that? And if what's wrong with renting a room in a 5-star hotel with tea being served by servants with white gloves on? And then, of course, naturally, you would have to up your price. So sometimes we are discriminating in a direction we're not even aware of, and in this example, upwards in authority, so to speak.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, actually, because I know several Reiki masters that choose that path, and they charge double, literally double what I charge. And I know they're providing the same service, but it is that perception. Like, they have a very clear target audience. And again, I think one of the differences between, say, in Europe and in Asia is, like, for example, a feng shui master in Asia gets paid a fortune. So this idea of paying for energy services is very well ingrained in the society in Asia. Whereas here, you know, everybody thinks it should be free or cheap or whatever. So that's a whole other aspect of Reiki. I don't know if you want to get into it now, but it's this whole idea of what's the issue with people just finding their own target, finding their own market, their own niche, their own area that they're comfortable playing in, and opening the doors to however that appears.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't want to go, that's a topic for another art talk. I don't want to go there. Actually, I'd like to go to much more acute, up-to-date, and much deeper conversation. And I was pleased that when I announced to you that I have like 2 focal points, I brought up the question of racism in relationship to authenticity. And I was very pleased that you said, let's do that. I'm ready to talk about anything. Thank you very much. You know, my son was yesterday here, and so you have you're not on camera now. You have a little bit of time to get a sip of water. When I tell the story about my son, who is a radio moderator, and he is involved in the hip hop scene and rap, and he has his own radio show, and when his girlfriend is studying politics, and when the 2 of them are here, we talk about, of course, what's going on in the world, and racism is a really big topic. And one of the questions he raised was how, or we discussed, how does he, as a radio moderator and a white man, how does he address the issue of racism? And we concluded that, yes, it's a hot potato, particularly as a white person. And yes, working for corporations or having responsibility for others means that they need to be considerate and mindful. But political correctness ending in not taking a stance cannot be it. So I would like to show you something, Elaine, and that's a nice break. And then we discuss this clip I would like to show, and have a look.
There was one aspect of South African culture that I could transplant to America. What would it be? What would it be? I think it would be maybe our general ease at talking about race and our racial past, you know, because South Africa and America have very, very similar histories, you know, in that there were many things that were done to people of color that were extremely heinous, but we just maybe because of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in our country, we were forced to talk about it, and we just talk about it. It's painful, but we laugh about it, and it's out there. Whereas in America, I find there's like a lot of tension in and around that. A lot of people are just like, yeah, oh, come on, we don't have to, do we have to bring that up? And it's like, dude, I'm not saying you did slavery, calm down. You know what I mean? Because that's how a lot of people treat it. They're just like, I wasn't there, I didn't say you were there. I'm just like, slavery happened. Yeah, but I swear I wasn't. Dude, you're 37. Calm down. You know what I mean? And I feel like there could be. It helps to be able to have conversations about those things, because then it helps you understand how you got to where you got to. But if you can't have those conversations, then you just have to operate in a blind space of like, how did this happen? You know, why do so many black people live in this part of Harlem? I don't know. Why do you think? I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying? And it actually opens it up, I think. That would be like the one part. And it doesn't fix everything, don't get me wrong. But I do think it makes it easier to address issues, to have conversations when you can just be like, yeah, man, this shit happened. You know what I mean? You can just be like, yeah, that was crazy. That was wild. That happened. That this happened. And that's the thing. A lot of the time, people think it's about assigning blame, but it's not. It's about addressing what happened, so that everyone can move forward and understand why things need to be fixed or how they got there in the first place. Does that make sense? Like imagine if your doctor, like you want to talk to your doctor about something that happened inside your body, and then you know your doctor scans, and then you're like, doc, I think I might have like a cancer. Your doctor's like, I wasn't there. I wasn't in with you. You're like, no, I just need your help fixing it. Yeah, I wasn't there though. I wasn't in. It's like, no, man, just chill out. You know what I mean? Let's talk about, that's the one thing. I'll transplant that. And chickens that don't like do weights and stuff.
He's such a funny guy.
He is, and actually he is also a very smart man.
Yes.
I have a particular liking for him, having lived myself in South Africa for a long time, and he is South African, and actually his father is Swiss, so there's But that's not the point why I like him. I like for the work he does and the messages he brings up. And basically what he's saying here is we need to talk to each other. We need to dare to speak uncomfortable truths. And we need to look at our pasts. And you know the reconciliation work I'm doing in the Reiki community specifically. And he mentioned the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. Truth comes first, that we actually look into what really happened and where did all of us maybe transgress or were victim to transgressions. And if we don't have the courage to name a spade, we are not getting anywhere. Political correctness can actually stop our evolution, and we have a very unique chance. I'm coming towards the end of our talk, Elaine, and I've shown you a video clip. I've brought up the question of racism, and that begs for the question of authenticity, our topic, racism and Reiki. And if you have some wise words to say, I'd be very happy to let you talk.
Gosh, these are huge topics, you know, just like you to give me a whacking great big topic. I think it has a lot to do with it, but I think something like racism actually is more to do with ignorance. You know, I mean, like yourself, I was brought up in a fairly expat, fairly multicultural kind of environment, as were my kids. So we have a lot at home. We have a lot of discussions around racism. I mean, they're as confused as me about it, frankly. And why people would treat each other differently. And it's not only that, it's like sexism as well, you know, all the isms, as I call it. It's just based on ignorance, because I don't know somebody from that color, or I don't know somebody from that religion, so therefore I dismiss it, or I don't understand it. And then part of this is the deepening of your understanding. And so, like you say, with talking, when you talk to somebody who's been at the other end of the stick, then you really start to experience more empathy and compassion with that person. So I think it's like getting people to research, getting people to understand, getting people to watch documentaries or just anything like that, whereby you're gaining a deeper understanding with an open heart, right? Like if you think that you are in a supreme belief structure, then there's no way that any of this can change. But I think that if you're open and willing to actually listen to somebody else's experience, somebody else's fact, or somebody else's truth, and not just dismiss it as irrelevant, then that's where conciliation really begins to have a power.
Yes, these are very beautiful and profound words, and I completely agree with you. And at one point I thought, yes, isms are the same thing as the belief systems we spoke about at the very beginning of our conversation. Yeah. So this has been great. I would like, nonetheless, before we close, there is one element linking in this last bit, missing in this last bit, and that's the opportunity Reiki provides, the opportunity, the treating other people, the self-treating, the growth. And to me, Reiki means holistic healing, which is another word for saying finding one's true authenticity. What is your take on this, Elaine?
Yeah, totally agree. The theme of my entire second book is this exact thing. It's looking at Reiki as not a tool to go into the hospitals with, though I grant that's also quite powerful, but more as a spiritual tool. So to really start to look at your belief systems, your structures, your past, your culture, looking at all the isms, looking at everything that you think as truth, and really examining it against the facts. Like, does it hold up to your experience? And when I mean facts, I don't mean scientifically proven stuff. I mean your own personal experience of that. And I think that that is the most important barometer to hold yourself to, is, do you have experience of this? Is it correct in your own life? And then that's really the only way you can move forwards, I think.
And with you, and I think these are beautiful closing words. What you said sounds like medicine for or against racism. Interesting, is it for the healing of racism? But finding authenticity in ourselves and walking our own talk, I truly believe is an important measure to come to an end of discrimination, whether that's racial, gender, what other ism there is out there in the world. Elaine, I thank you very much. Dear viewers, you see Elaine's website at the bottom. And I say goodbye to you, Elaine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, dear viewers. And I hope you enjoyed that. And I'm looking forward to our next art talk. I'm sure there will be another interesting topic. Bye-bye.